Hello, this is Nick with Sonic Perspectives, and welcome to episode number 3 of our Talking Perspectives series. In today's episode, we'll be giving our perspectives on the new box set from Rikard Sjöblom's Gunfly, the forthcoming Amorphis album Queen of Time, and the recent compilation released by Nightwish called Decades, as well as some thoughts on their tours and the band's evolution and future. Now, with me today, I have once again Joel Barrios.
Hello, everyone.
Austin is once again joining us, whose last name I'm not going to pronounce this time.
Duly noted and appreciated. Greetings to one and all.
And Chris McCoy, for the first time on Talking Perspectives, welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Now, for our first topic, we have a special guest. Joel, why don't you introduce him for us?
Thank you, Nick. Yeah, just before jumping into our first topic, I would like to invite to this conversation to probably the best person to discuss it with. Mostly known as the multi-instrumentalist and creative force behind the now extinct Beerfish, and very hard to pronounce last name. I'll let him do the honors to identify himself, thus preventing all of you from listening to myself murdering the Swedish language.
All right, that's nice of you, Joel. My name is Rikard Sjöblom, and it's a pleasure to be here.
All right, well, I already butchered it once, but thank you very much for correcting. We're going to stick to the first name from here on out, but let's get to the point at hand here. We all have, or we've all heard, I think most of us, the bulk of the albums prior to even having it, but there's a new box set out. It's called the Rumbling Box. It covers the years 2006 to 2016, and one thing it does is it clears up a bit of confusion in your history, specifically with the names of your various projects. So briefly, why don't you start off telling us, how this consolidates everything and helps you move forward?
Well, the thing was that, I released an album back in 2003. It actually didn't come out properly until 2006. It's called Cyklonmannen, or The Cyclone Man, which it's like a musical interpretation of a novel that I really like by a Swedish author, really unknown outside of Sweden, and barely a lot of people know about him here as well. So, but I love the thing, and then after that I decided I wanted to, record more solo stuff, but I wanted to have a band name or a moniker for it. So I started Gunfly, which was still basically me, but with a live band and, things like that. So, and then I released 2 albums with that, Please Be Quiet in 2009 and Lamentations in 2011. And then I joined Big Train a couple of years later, and thought that, okay, a lot of people don't know what Gunfly is, so let's do an album on my own name, which I did, called The Unbendable Sleep. And that album really should have been a Gunfly album from the start, but it was just, momentary lack of, I don't know, whatever, sanity. But so I'm correcting that now.
Very good. Yes, and everything is all under one title now, and I assume, hopefully, we'll be going forward, and you're not going to throw even more names into the mix coming up here. Now, Austin, I know Chris, of course, he wrote a review of the box set, and of course we're going to post the link to that, and already a lot of great stuff there, and I'll share my thoughts. But why don't you give us a little bit of your history with the band and what you think of the collected works here?
Yeah, kudos to Chris, by the way. It is a fantastic review. I read
Thank
that
you.
before receiving my copy. You're welcome. And because I didn't know what to expect, I bought The Unbendable Sleep when it came out, which, Rikard, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that was shortly after Beardfish Called It a Day, if I remember correctly.
It was before, actually.
It was? Okay, all right. And to be honest, at that time, I've listened to Beardfish since 2008, give or take. It was right around the time of Sleeping in Traffic Part 2. And I'll be honest, I don't know what planet I was living on. And Nick, I'm setting you up for a joke later on that one. But I didn't know about Gunfly. So I guess I'm one of those people that, all of a sudden I knew, The Unbendable Sleep was coming out. And I said, well, of course I have to pick that up. And I loved it from the get-go. It was a great album, and it was a different side, Rikard, to your songwriting, I thought, than what I was used to with Beardfish, and I'm sure that's intentional on your part. And now with the Rumbling Box, which I'm happy to say I was the first person to purchase it through your new website. It's, I had heard the latest album, On Her Journey to the Sun. So I'm kind of like working backwards into it. The first thing I did was open it up and pop in disc 1, Cyclonemannen. And, I thought it very much felt like a younger guy who was just kind of locked in a room, just experimenting and doing cool stuff. And I enjoyed that for it. But what really got me, and I think it's an album that's going to stick with me for years and years, is Please Be Quiet. That's surprisingly, out of all of the 5 discs in there, is far and away my favorite. And now I understand the name of the box set from the song, Rumbling Boxes. And I sort of now understand not only the choice of the title, but I understand the meaning behind the phrase as well. And that song is just one heck of an awesome little jam session by the end. And I love it dearly. And sure. And I've been spinning that disc pretty continually ever since the box arrived in my mailbox. And I think for anyone who's a Beardfish fan, or anyone who's a big Train fan as well, there's definitely, like Chris said in his review, there's something for everyone in this box for sure.
Now, with that, Austin, I have a story actually that relates back to yours, and I do want to tell it, but I want to get Rikard in here a little bit. Take us back to the time of Please Be Quiet, because that was your first Gungfly album, your first work outside of Beardfish. And of course, now we don't have Beardfish, but at the time, they were going side by side. Did you kind of foresee the end of Beardfish at that time already?
Oh, no, not at all. I mean, Beardfish was going as strong as ever. I think when we were recording like Destined Solitaire around Christmas 2008, we had it was a really sort of how do you put it, creative period for us. So me managing to sort of record Please Be Quiet at the same time was really insane. Actually, I had so much material going on, and not all of it fitted in Beardfish. So
yeah, and that's one thing I think we can all be thankful for, is that during the years that we had Beardfish, wasn't, I guess, the longest run of years, but it was a very productive run of years. And I want to tell my story quick before I throw back to Chris, which is that, and I did the research on this to look it back up, but it was Nearfest, not the year that you played, but Nearfest in 2008. I still distinctly remember, and you can't remember this with every band, but I very much do with Beardfish. I went to a stand for Progression magazine, and they had a deal where if you signed up for a year, they had a bunch of different promo discs down, and you got to take 4 promo discs with you. And I grabbed 3 that I really didn't know, and there was one name that I'd heard. I was like, I should really get this, and it was Beardfish, and it was Sleeping in Traffic Part 2. And I was able to get that, and then the next year, Beardfish came, and I didn't have the money for the festival that year. I literally paid a guy $20 to use his wristband just during Beardfish's set. That's all I saw at Nearfest that year, and I've been on board and a huge fan ever since. So for me, with the box set, it's been, I had even the first disc, which I think I got at the same time I got the Unbendable Sleep. So I had everything but the last disc, and I'm assuming that Chris did too. So let's talk about that for a second. The bonus disc, if you will, that comes with the set is an album in all Swedish. I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce the name. I'll also leave that for Rikard at some point. But Chris, given that I'm assuming that was, I believe, the only material that was really fresh to you, what did you think of the bonus disc?
Right. So the bonus disc, geez, how do you say that thing? We just call it disc 5 in my house. Yeah,
that's a better title, maybe.
It is so different than anything that I have ever listened to, and it might be pretty different compared to what most of our listeners on here might have heard before, because I am by no means a disco fan, but I'm also not really a jazz fan either. And so, but Cyclone was a great album, and it's, very jazz. And I feel like this new album has a lot of disco elements, a lot of pop elements, and it's not at all the kind of thing I typically listen to. But there's just still that Rikard style to it, all those, those crazy flourishes, and it's ridiculously fun. I'm not one to just, get up and dance to music or sing along, but I'm singing along to this and I don't even know what any of the words are, but you can, hey, 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 you can sing that. So yeah, I just
sure can.
well, kind of. Yeah. Can I guest spot on your next album, please?
Well,
Oh,
one
yeah,
thing,
sure.
Chris and I have both guest spotted on a Beardfish album already.
Sure.
We were both on Comfort Zone.
Yeah, I think Joel was in there too, right?
Pretty much everyone that was at the pool deck that day appears in the booing container in the song in the album. So we were pretty much all lucky.
That's right. We all have our spot. So I'm sorry. Going back to the bonus disc, I agree. I thought it was a great addition. One thing I want to ask Rikard about with that, was that one of the great things about doing this box set? Would you have ever have thought of releasing this album if it wasn't for a special package like this?
That was the plan, yeah. The Swedish disc was actually meant to be like the third Gunfly album, but at some point in I think it was like in the late stages of recording it, we started thinking that because me, Petter, and Rasmus Diamant, the two brothers playing bass and drums with me, they were a huge part of that production and that album in general. I mean, they helped out, a whole lot with everything. And I think that when all the songs became, they were written in Swedish, all of them, and I never started translating them. So like after the mix was done and everything, it was like we sort of lost the energy to push it forward and didn't really know what to do with it because it didn't fit in with any of any of the other stuff really. So I mean, musically, of course, as you say, Chris, it's like there's some disco on it, there's some funk, and there's some jazz, and I mean that's basically part of the thing that we collaborated on, that everyone had shipped in with their style of playing. I mean, because I wrote the songs, but if I would have recorded them myself and decided everything, they wouldn't have sounded that way. So I mean that's what I mean. But Petter and Rasmus had a huge part in it, so. It would have come out eventually, I think, but I don't think it would have come out as Gunfly. Actually, maybe it would have been a different project altogether. But we sort of lost the muster to, do it properly and promote it and everything.
I'm going to go over to Austin. He has a comment, but first, real quick, Rikard, pronounce that album for us so we can play a fun game later of how many takes it takes us to get it right.
Sure, here you go. Att för barn som tror på sagor läsa högt när kvällen kommer.
There you go. That just rolls right off the tongue. Say that 5
Very
times
nice.
fast. Austin, you had a comment?
How do you follow up that? No, all I wanted to say is, I think it's interesting exploring this from different perspectives. No pun intended. That I'm an American, primarily English speaker. I also speak quite a bit of German, but it's interesting to me how many bands outside of the U.S., European bands predominantly, but some Mexican bands as well, will sing in English. And I think, Rikard, this is kind of a question for you. I think it's for marketability purposes, because if they sing in their native language, it might not be able to, sell all over the EU or make it over to the States and Canada and everything. Like it doesn't have the legs to become popular. And as I think all of us are fans of slightly off-kilter music, I think. And there are times where I wish that, as much as I enjoy, for example, hearing like Roy Khan singing Camelot with a little bit of an accent to his English, there are times that I wish I could hear more bands singing in their native language. And for example, a good friend of mine, another Swede, Ragnar Widerberg from Witherscape with Don Svano and Witchcraft and a number of other bands. He's in a band and they're singing all in Swedish now. And I can't wait to get that, because I just think it just gives a whole different feel and vibe, and maybe even a little bit of authenticity. And Rikard, what do you feel about bands, sticking to their native language versus switching to English?
Well, I think it's really cool, actually. Sometimes I, wish I could have done it, but the first Beerfish album, we had a couple of songs, or 3 songs, I think, in Swedish, and the rest of them were in English. The thing was that I rarely write in Swedish. For some reason, I think it's more difficult to sort of, express certain things. And the thing with singing in Swedish as well is that I think I sing a bit differently than I do when I sing in English.
So too, yeah.
Well, it's kind of weird, actually. I have written some lyrics in Swedish, and most of the stuff I had ended up on Att för barn, the fifth disc, we call it that, in this box. So I still have a couple more, but, I don't know really what to do with them. So
it's also interesting to me, sorry, Nick, how a lot of bands who I hear sing in Swedish, their singing voices in English rather, they sing English beautifully, and then when they speak it, you can hear the accent creep in, like the band Graveyard, for example. You would never know that they were non-native English speakers when you hear them sing, and it's really cool to hear the difference between singing voice and speaking voice in the other language.
And it's not just international singers too, or non-native English speakers. You look at Ozzy Osbourne, and you almost have the same effect.
Or Ted Nugent, right?
Yes. Now, one thing I wanted to comment on, and I find it to be advantageous in this case, probably not in others, and it probably makes me a little bit of a terrible reviewer in some ways, is that I truly do not tend to focus on lyrics. I tend to see the vocals in a song more as a instrument of melody delivery than I do message delivery in my personal experience. So even going back to the first Beardfish album, which is partly in Swedish, a lot of people don't necessarily, even Beardfish fans don't necessarily have that album, but I truly enjoy those albums. Not that I'd want to hear them all the time, but it doesn't take too much away from me. I really enjoy those discs, and I enjoy disc 5 in this case. Do you think, going to instrumental albums too, when you lose the voice completely, do you think that the experience is similar there to people who are listening to instrumental as opposed to a foreign language, Rikard?
Because I'm a big fan of instrumental music myself, and I also like listening to, for instance, PFM, who sing in Italian, and I don't know what the hell they're talking about, but I mean, I've always enjoyed different languages, because all the different languages have different melodies to them, different ways of expressing themselves.
All right. Well, and, before we finish up here now, Joel promised that he would let us kind of carry this segment, but I am genuinely interested in what he has to say, because I know, like us, he has been a long-time fan. So, Joel, I'm going to ask you shortly, can you give us your impression of the solo career thus far of Rikard?
Well, I would probably be kind of biased, in my opinion, because I've been a big Rikard fan since I discovered his musical output. But anyway, I've been enjoying the heck out of this box encompassing all the Gunfly albums to date. It's a way to come full circle, having them now under the same moniker, probably the way they were meant to be in a perfect world. My only pending wish would be to have this same box on vinyl. And I understand that from the economic standpoint, it might be not feasible at this point. This is a compilation of mostly previously released work. And probably when people approach Rikard's music, they do so coming from either Big Big Train or Beardfish. Yet maybe in the future, this could be something Rikard would be willing to set his mind into. And I would love to have this very same box, the same combination of albums, obviously depending on the running time limitations proper to vinyl. Because if I'm not mistaken, and please Rikard correct me if I'm wrong, only the Unbendable Sleep was previously released on wax.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
In a very limited run under Planet Groovy. So maybe when the time is right in the future, this could finally see the light of day.
First off, of course, that would be your complaint. But let's go over to Chris. I believe he has a comment on that.
Well, I was hoping to ask Rikard a question related to live performances, because I know that we're in a new era now, with the Gunfly material, but there's this amazing Beardfish catalog, and I'm not saying, Rikard, please get Beardfish back together, although that would be great. But I'm just hoping that we don't retire that Beardfish catalog Is there any chance of hearing some Beardfish material in future live shows?
Well, I mean, for me, it's not an impossibility, but at the same time, it's like right now I don't have any plans for it, but if I feel like it, I will do it, and I would encourage anyone to to play Beardfish songs as well, because I think that those songs, they deserve to be played.
So one thing I wanted to talk about a little bit too, with these box sets, and Inside Out's done a couple of them now, you have the opportunity to go back and kind of, write freely about your history. And what I really appreciated in your bio, especially inside the box, was that you were very honest and frank in regards to Beardfish. And I know we're all sad to see it, but it was very plain there. It was basically Beardfish is over and get over it as far as union and things like that. It was... and it helps us accept it, like, okay, this is the normal moving forward, and that's what we got to go with. And it's certainly nothing against you, because everyone here especially loves your solo output, but it puts us to bed as, okay, we don't have to look back. There's no point, because you've made it pretty clear that there is no Beardfish going forward. Was it therapeutic being able to put that out there?
Well, a little bit, I guess, but I mean, at the same time, because I think that's what I wrote in the booklet as well, that I miss Beardfish too, because it's been such a big part of my life for all these years, and I was really sad to see it go down the drain, but there was really nothing else we could do at the time, so it was a choice we had to make.
Fair enough. Now, I know at least Chris and myself are going to be seeing you at Night of the Prague, and yeah. I know that you're going to be there with not one, but two acts. So I know the main focus here, of course, is talking about the box set. But, tell us a little bit, of course, about what Big Train has planned as well.
Oh, you mean for Lorelei or in general, or?
In general, what you guys have been working on. I know you had a member change, and that might revamp the live show a little bit. What's gonna be like here in the future for us?
Andy Poole basically chose to leave the band, and we brought on Robin Armstrong to fill his place for live shows, basically, and that's going to be great, I think. I mean, Robin is an excellent choice in my book, so it's going to be awesome to play with him. We have a show, like a warm-up show for Lorelei, coming up in Basingstoke. I think I'm pronouncing that somewhere in the ballpark, and that's like 2 days before our show at Lorelei. I know that Greg and David have been writing a lot of songs, and there's probably going to be recording starting for that for like the next album pretty soon, like in the fall or something. And also I'm recording, like I've started recording a new album for Gunfly as well, so that's moving along as well.
Very good, and we're all going to be looking forward to that. And I must say, Basingstoke or whatever it is, who has the balls to name a town something so difficult to pronounce? Who would do such a thing?
Well, I live in Sweden, so I can send you a few names.
And let's do this. We're going to be moving on shortly here to our next topic, but let's go to everyone to give everyone a chance to do that one final question for Rikard. We have him here. Austin, let's start with you. What's the one burning thing you want to know?
Oh, no pressure. I mean, I guess we've covered a lot. We've covered what's next for Big Train, what's next for Gunfly. We've talked about Beardfish in the past. Nick, you might have to do some editing here, but I mean, he's touched on everything I wondered about, honestly.
Now, there's nothing I like more than making Austin looking silly, so the thought of editing this out is completely foreign to me.
Perish the thought.
But I'll consider it. Joel, I saw your hand going up. Why don't you give us one?
I might be sounding here like a broken record, pun intended, but my only question for Rikard is, when the heck we're gonna have all the Beardfish works on vinyl, man? I mean, I wanna have Sleeping in Traffic on vinyl and listen to it before I die.
I do too. Yeah, no, but actually we have been talking about it, as soon as I meet any of the Beardfish guys, that's the first thing we talk about. So, we talk about it like once a month at least, and I'm sure it will happen sometime because we do have the rights to put it out. So I mean, we could do it ourselves if we wanted to. The problem is, of course, that we're not like a unit anymore. So that means that either one of us does it, or like we do like a business thing together, which is kind of weird. But yeah, we'll figure something out.
I
I'm
would
sure.
say that probably a good idea for that would be some sort of like bringing over the topic from our previous episode, doing some sort of crowdfunding campaign for that. Because that way you will gauge exactly what is the interest. And, the money goes to a single account, and then you can figure out the business side between the four of you later on. Obviously, you will get the money beforehand, before going into production, because obviously the thing with vinyl is there is expenses to produce.
Well, yeah, but you say that because you're smart, and I'm a musician, so.
No.
Well, let's do. Okay.
I'm just joking,
Joel, I know that outside your door is just this beautiful, glorious dead horse, and it's just so hard not to beat it. But let's move on. Let's move on to Chris for a final question here.
All right, so I was thinking, what's the dumbest question that I could ask that no one is wondering the answer to? And here's what I got. So, on her journey to the sun, there's a song on there called Keith, and I love the story about how Keith got its name, about how you didn't have a title for it, and you're playing it at this show in Canada, I think. And oh, nice. And so you say, I don't know what to call this, and some guy in the back yells out Keith, and you end up calling the song Keith. And I'm wondering, since the album has come out, have you heard anything from Keith? Because I would be flipping out if there was a song named after me.
Well, no, I haven't actually.
That's a shame.
Yeah, it's kind of funny, but I'm sure he's a big Train fan, because there were a lot of big people there that night. So maybe he's a member of the forum. I'm not sure. Big Train has this really sort of prolific forum where a lot of people thrive in writing stuff every day, which is awesome.
Well, we're going to do one more. I said that Chris was going to be last, but Austin has a question he'd like to throw in.
I made you a liar, Nick. No, my thing is, speaking of Big Train, is I've seen, and I'm sure you guys have probably all noticed this as well, over the past maybe, 5 years, definitely since Folklore, Big Train has just like taken off in sort of a meteoric rise. And Rikard, how has that, have you seen any of that kind of overflow from fandom into Gungfly and everything? Or are you noticing more people taking note of, for example, in Prague, you were rated the number 4 guitarist of last year. That's, not to say anything about your skill as a guitarist, but that's surprising. You're right up there with Steve Hackett and, the biggest names. So, what do you think of how things have been going for you as a recent solo artist, basically? Well, at least since Beardfish. How have things changed since Big Train has just gained more and more popularity?
That's a great question. I'm not really sure. The thing is that I think they're kind of separate things, no matter how you sort of view it. Because sure, Big Train is gaining a lot of popularity, but still, like for instance, when someone listens to Beardfish on Spotify, Spotify does not bring up Gungfly as a suggestion. And I think it's basically the same thing with Big Train. If someone listens to Big Train there, they don't immediately get a suggestion to go listen to my solo stuff. So I'm still kind of the new kid on the block, you know, even though I've been here for a while.
I guess I just assume everyone's as maniacal as we all are, that as soon as they hear something they like, they start digging in to see, to the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon sort of thing.
I'm sort of like that myself. I've been a big fan of like the Finnish band Wigwam since like the early 2000s, and even though, because I've been a big fan, I haven't really checked out their individual work. And I recently started listening to Pekka Pohjola, the bass player, to his solo records, which I highly recommend. It's just awesome stuff. And also Wigwam, if you haven't listened to those guys. Start with like Fairport and Being, and those albums. They're just, they're awesome, man. It's just a huge inspiration for me.
A big thing for me is, I'll start those sort of searches at like midnight, and then next thing I know, it's 4 a.m, and I have like 17 tabs open, and I'm on Amazon, I'm on Wikipedia, and my wife comes out and she's like, "Will you go to bed, for crying out loud?" I'm like, "Okay,
yeah,
okay."
And stop spending all our money.
Yeah. We call it going down the rabbit hole. So yeah.
That's right.
All right, well, let me do this. Let me wrap this segment up here. A couple of notes, of course. We're going to hit on the minor one for tonight first. Big Train, they have some shows coming up. Certainly check those out and keep an eye on those. But the important thing is we have Rikard here. He has a last name. I'm not going to pronounce it. He also has a moniker. It's called Gungfly. The new set is Rumbling Box, and it's 5 discs, 5 full discs, and it's, I believe, still 35 euros shipped. Which is a pretty incredible deal if you get it from his website. And, of course, Joel will have the link up for that. So please, everyone, go check it out. Again, let's all thank our guest. Thank you, Rikard.
Oh, thank you, guys. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Likewise. Thank you.
Goodbye, Rikard, and thank you for doing this with us.
Yeah, goodbye, guys. I'm going to try to
get
catch
some sleep.
shut-eye.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. I know it's late. Come night of the Prague. Chris owes you the first beer, and I'll get you the second.
Oh, cheers, man.
Sounds good.
And then I'll get the third and fourth for you. So cheers, man.
So now we are going to move on to topic number 2, and what we're going to do here is we're dropping Chris, who was a Gungfly and Rikard expert, and we're, of course, dropping Rikard, and we are bringing back one regular. Say hello, Gonzo.
What's up, guys?
And we are bringing on one guy. This is making his first appearance here at Talking Perspectives. Welcome, Rodrigo Altaf.
Hello, good to be here, guys.
All right, so we are going to be talking about an upcoming release. It's coming out May 18th on Nuclear Blast, and it is the new album from Amorphis, Queen of Time. Now, because he is new to it, I'm going to let Rodrigo start. Give us just some general thoughts on the new album.
Yeah, well, first of all, this is the Scandinavian edition of the Talking Perspectives. I don't know if you guys realize that yet, but we're only talking Scandinavian artists, right? So, and this is not a concept album, but there's a common theme there, which is the rise and fall of cultures. I don't know where to begin with this album, but it impressed me so much. The previous album, Under a Red Cloud, was so good, but this one, in the words of their guitar player, Asa Holopainen, is like Under a Red Cloud with steroids. And I have to agree. This is by far one of their best releases in, 4 or 5 years, maybe. I don't know. I'm so impressed with it. The track number 3 is my favorite so far, Daughter of Hate. There's a saxophone there mixed with growling vocals. There's a narration there in Finnish, which is just exquisite. I love it.
All right, no surprise there. I'm expecting some similar thoughts from you, Gonzo. What do you have?
Well, let's see where to begin. It's Finnish and it's metal, and that's usually a very good combination. Right from the beginning, like the opening salvos of that heavily delayed guitar at the beginning of the B, it immediately reminded me of The Way from 1999. That was not my first Amorphis album. It was my second Amorphis album, but it was the one that really, really got to me. As much as I love Elegy, and I think it is a superior album to Tuonela, for me at the time was I connected with it on an emotional level. And those delayed guitars at the beginning of the B reminded me immediately of Tuonela. And I was like, wow, we're getting like a little bit of the post-Pasi Koskinen sound of Amorphis, the more revved up, the more driving, the more energetic side of Amorphis. And we're kind of bringing that back to the, into the post-Elegy and Tuonela era of Amorphis. And I thought that I was going to be in for something really, really nice, and I was right. This album is great, and I love it. It harkens back to Tuonela. It harkens back to Elegy. It manages to move forward from under the red cloud. And I don't think it's inappropriate at all that it also marks the return of the bass player on those original Amorphis albums. You know, it's almost like they're coming back in full circle, and you hear that from the first few seconds of the first song. I'm like, dude, I'm okay with this.
I'm loving the raw emotion here. You truly do love this album. And personally, I'm a big fan as well. Joel's laughing. I don't know why. He'll be doing the same fanboy thing over albums in not too much time, I'm sure. But in any case, my history of Amorphis is this. I think I'm a little bit of a outlier here. My favorite Amorphis album is Am Universum. And I will make no qualms about it. I'm not a fan of the heavier vocals, the aggressive vocals. I generally am not. But let that be a note of how much I enjoy Amorphis's music. And it continues onto this album that I'm able to overlook that or I'm able to go through that because I love what they do so much. And my like and dislike of their albums kind of usually rises and falls with the amount of those vocals. And despite this album heavily relying on them, I'd say even more than most in recent times, I really do enjoy it. And it is truly a well-written album. It is, definitely Amorphis sound. And I really think they have struck on something special here again. So, Joel, I know you want to speak. Why don't you give us your thoughts?
Well, I mean, Amorphis elitists have been complaining about decades, probably, on how this band has been progressively changing its sound to the point of no longer even being a heavy metal band. And in reality, in my opinion, the truth of the matter is that ever since their departure from the world of death metal, their music, though obviously lighter in flavor, has improved in the songwriting department. For those unfamiliar with the trajectory of the band itself, and you know that I love to bring history at some point into the conversation. Their first album was a pure death metal record, plenty of dark, abysmal, and probably unbearable heavy riffs combined with a slop tempo drumming and the original and brutal vocals. Anyone here familiar with the first record by any chance?
Yeah, Betrayal and Isthmus. It's
exactly.
Not my favorite.
Then there's their second album, Tales from a Thousand Lakes, was still rooted in death metal, but began a period of evolution, fusing their sound with psychedelia and progressive elements and traditional folk. And as a matter of fact, the record is based on the Finnish 19th century work of epic poetry that I believe is named Kalevala, or Kalevala, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that Kalevala correctly. So
let's get Rikard back in here to pronounce everything for us.
From there on, some sort of evolution morphed their sound to the point that the 2001 album that Nick was commenting about and saying that it was his favorite, Am Universum, was completely stripped down from death growth and included a prominent keyboard work, saxophone, and even more psychedelia. In my case, I firmly believe that the addition of Tommy Justin to the band was certainly an inflection point. For whatever reason, he breathed life into the band. And also with him, the Cookie Monster vocals returned. And I know that Nick doesn't enjoy them, but they came back in a whole new level. I mean, he's capable to perform both hypnotizing clean vocals and rebellious growls in a perfect way, from one moment to another. In my personal opinion, since Skyforger, they have been doing what many bands are actually afraid to do. They have taken all they have done over their career and put it into a blender. And probably the last 4 albums, they have been somehow perfecting this approach. And I would say that with Queen of Time, it actually showcases the culmination of it.
And one thing I will say, because you touched on it a little bit, Joel, with their current vocalist, one thing I do appreciate in any band that has the growly vocals or the harsher vocals or whatever you want to say, I try not to say Cookie Monster because it sounds dismissive, but thank you for saying it. is I like it when one vocalist does everything and can shift in and out. I find it to be more genuine, and I find it to take away less than, some guy coming in just to do that. And for whatever reason, when they have a dedicated person just to do that, it grates on me more for whatever reason. So I always have enjoyed that about the modern era of Amorphis is hearing someone who can really sing, move in and out, seamlessly through the different styles. Now, Gonzo, I know that doesn't bother you probably at all. So why don't you just give us an idea of what you think of the vocals overall in Amorphis, especially on the new album, what you thought the performance was like on the new record?
The vocals are actually the thing that surprised me the least, because Tommy brought the level of the quality of the vocals of Amorphis to an entirely different level from the very beginning. Joel and I were talking about this earlier. We're not, well, at least I'm not personally fond of the last two albums that Amorphis did with Pasi Koskinen. And when Tommy joined the band, he brought what I thought was a much needed shot of adrenaline to the band and brought the vocals up to a level that, as much as I like the first two albums of Pasi Koskinen, exceeded the quality of those vocals, and he's just been on a roll ever since. I would have been a lot more surprised if the vocal performance had not been good, but we've just come to expect, like Amorphis fans have simply come to expect nothing but excellence coming from the band, and Tommy is a big part of that. But there are a few guest vocalists on this album. Is it too early to talk about that?
It's never too early. Go ahead and talk about it.
Okay, there are two guest vocalists, and one of them is not entirely familiar to the world of metal. He's a Mongolian, well, technically a Tuvan throat singer named Albert Gulbezin. I probably mangled his last name. But he does the traditional Mongolian style of throat singing, which a lot of metal fans first heard with the group Tenger Cavalry. I always mispronounce their name, but I think you guys know who I'm talking about. He does that kind of interesting, Turkic Mongolian singing that you don't really hear anywhere else, and he appears on this album. It's interesting. I was doing a little bit of research on him, and I had only heard of one other group with whom he has collaborated, and they are also a Finnish group, not metal. They are a Finnish folk group called Badkina, and he appeared on one of their albums, I think, about 15 years ago. But it was really interesting to hear, I guess, the influence of Tenger Cavalry, a completely different kind of folk metal, show up in one of the bands that brought folk metal to the forefront in the first place. Another guest singer who appeared on the last album, and she seems to have a certain fondness for metal bands whose names start with the letter I, none other than Anneke van Giersbergen, formerly of The Gathering, and guesting on I don't know how many different bands these days. She, or at least somebody that sounds a lot like her, makes an appearance on what song is it? On
We Accused.
Amongst Stars. No, Amongst Stars. And it's any day that you hear Anneke van Giersbergen's voice is a good day in my book. And hearing that during my drive to Dallas to shoot Nightwish at about 4 a.m. made me stay awake. It was fantastic.
And I got to cut in and agree there. One thing that I really enjoyed about this time, because she does it with Devin so well already, is hearing her contrasting with the other vocals of Amorphis. It does make a really nice blending, and I really did enjoy that track. Rodrigo, what about you? What did you think about her guest appearance?
I think it was great. I love that song so much. And you guys were talking about Tommy. To me, I'm a fan of the latter-day Amorphis, and he joined in 2005, but to me, he's always been the face of the band. He does the old material justice as well, and this album actually marks the fact that the band now has more albums with him on vocals than with other singers. And there's still a minority of fans who ask for the return of Pasi, but his last albums with the band, I agree with Gonzo, they didn't do Amorphis justice. So I'm happy that Tommy's on board, and he's the face of Amorphis for me. Amorphis will embark on a large U.S. tour in the fall, September and October, with Dark Tranquility and Moonspell. And it's a bill for me that you cannot miss.
Yeah, and I
am
will
so
add
stoked for that tour. I can't wait.
I will
It's
add
going to be
say,
awesome.
Amorphis has come to the U.S. before, and they usually tour with bands that I have no interest in seeing, so I haven't seen them. That being said, I do have the live DVD, and I can see why people definitely want to go see them, because it is a fantastic set. Joel, why don't you give us a little summary and take us out of topic number 2?
Trying to summarize my opinion for this album. The songwriting has stayed melodic and folkloricist, and the vocal melodies are even more endemic with memorable instrumental passages, and it brings some sort of a cinematic dramatism to their sound, yet still retaining their hallmark style. And I believe the plethora of guest appearances in the album and the input of Jens Bogren as the sound engineer have actually rounded up the kaleidoscopic magnificence of the music. Above everything else, what makes this album so astounding for my ears is the mood that it creates when listening to it. Queen of Time includes enough experimentation to reinvigorate their style while keeping a consistent flow, using longing and catchy melodies carried by enchanting and melancholy keyboard sounds, powerful yet simple riffs, meeting the vocal delivery of Tommy Justin, and man, can he sing. All in all, if you haven't followed the band so far, or if you have lost track of them during the last decade, this album would be a perfect starting point, or probably a glorious reintroduction to the world of Amorphis.
And I do kind of want to take the discussion back to what I mentioned earlier with Albert Kuvezin's appearance. I mentioned that it kind of sounds like they're bringing inspiration from other more contemporary, younger folk metal bands. And you hear that a lot. I listened to this entirely during my drive to Dallas. So the drive to Dallas sucks. So I didn't get a chance to look at the song's name. But there's one song where they are taking a cue from Orphanland and from Meadoff. You hear oods, you hear Arab strings, and it sounds fantastic. And not only that, Kriegel Glensman of the group Elvati, and the group Elvati, in my opinion, is the most important folk metal man to emerge since Amorphis themselves. Kriegel shows up on this album to lend his pipe playing abilities. All in all, I think that this album is doing a fantastic job of not only borrowing from the band's own past, but also borrowing from contemporary folk metal bands in order to forge a new path forward. And honestly, I love it.
All right, well, that's a perfect end to this. Again, that was Queen of Time. From Amorphis, it's coming out May 18th via Nuclear Blast. My personal recommendation at the end of the day is if you're either indifferent to or can tolerate the harsh vocals, they are turned up a little bit on this album, but if that's okay with you, it's definitely, absolutely going to be one of those releases you want to get this year. So let's move on now. We're going to get Austin to speak again as we move into our final topic of the night. And it is going to be a album and band that hopefully, until we get into the band names, we'll stop butchering the language and the pronunciation of things here. Because the band's easy. It's Nightwish. The album is easy. It's Decades. So I'll let all you guys say band member names so I don't look like any more of a fool. But it came out March 9th via Nuclear Blast, and it's a summary of the band's career thus far. It is a compilation right up into their last album with Floor. And, you know, a lot of you guys have been a fan a lot longer of Nightwish than I have. So, Gonzo, why don't we start with you?
Oh, wow. My relationship with Nightwish goes back 20 years. Can you believe that? I got into Nightwish when Oceanborn came out. A guy that I knew from work just was listening to them one day, and I'd never heard anything like it before. You got to tell me who this is. And a short time later, I was at a metal fest where where Necropolis Records, the death metal label from the 90s, was selling a whole bunch of vinyl, and there they were, the first 2 Nightwish LPs, the original pressings. I think I paid $12 for each of them, and I've been a fan ever since. The Decades compilation, it seemed Nightwish fans tend to be very dedicated, and it kind of seemed a little superfluous to put out a compilation of from every album that they've ever released, simply because everybody knows all the material already. What they did do right was to remaster the older songs, even the song Nightwish from a demo, and remaster the songs from Angel Fall First and Promotion Born. They sound noticeably better. And quite honestly, I would like to see those first 2 albums and the demo released, remastered, remixed. I would really, really like to hear that. But the compilation is a very good representation of their career. For like the Nightwish noob, somebody that is just not familiar with them at all, this covers a lot of the highlights, and I would absolutely recommend it to anybody that is not familiar enough with Nightwish and would like an introduction. It's a good starting point.
Yeah, as someone who only came into the fold with Dark Passion Play, getting to hear some of the older material, I certainly did enjoy a lot of it. That being said, I also realized why I didn't get into Nightwish sooner. It's a band that I certainly had been introduced to, I had listened to, and it's when I got to the track Kinslayer that I really remembered why I kind of just didn't pay attention to them. It's because a lot of the vocals back in the early days did not sit well with me, and some of the tracks from Tarja I was okay with, but a track like that it was just no good for me, and I realized why I kind of passed them by. That being said, musically, I'm kind of sad that I have all this time. I'm kind of sad that I missed their recent show here on the East Coast.
Oh no!
I know,
you poor guy.
I know, especially with how much I like Floor, and it's like I probably missed something great. I admit that, and I really did enjoy the compilation and the look through a lot of that material I was unfamiliar with. Now, Joel, I know you had a comment for us, or I don't know if a comment's the word. I understand you have a soliloquy for us.
Well, if you're going to call it like that, I might have an unpopular opinion here. I'm going to refer to the actual Decades release and not to the band itself, because I discovered them a while back, pretty much probably at the very same time that Gonzalo was saying. I mean, Nightwish is one of Finland's main exports. They have been at the front line in the development of the symphonic metal for coming up to 20 years. And they have released a high number of compilations so far in their career, but in the band's defense, these compilations have been often released by former labels trying to cash in. So right now we have Decades, and is some sort of greatest hits put out by the band, covering all the records they have ever made, and even going back to the group's very first demo release like 22 years ago. And for those who haven't bought an Nightwish record yet, or those who haven't checked the band out, this is a competent compilation that retraces the band's career in anti-chronological order. And something that immediately caught my attention is what I just mentioned, that the first featured track in the album is actually the greatest show on earth, coming from their last studio records. Hence, the order is chronologically reversed. So there's a positive side to this compilation for me, and there's a negative side. On the positive side, and I believe that Gonzalo said that before, the old material has been remastered, and in this case, it's been totally for the better. Most of the original albums, especially Ocean Born and Century Child, suffer from excessive dynamic range compression and audible distortion in the loudest parts, which is actually a common thing. Probably you guys have heard of that phenomenon called the loudness wars. Very, very common after 1994. Now all the songs have undergone the proper mixing treatment and is improving the overall listening experience. But on the negative side, for me, the track list is very debatable. In my humble opinion, starting a compilation which most likely aims to engage those that are not familiar with the band's material with a 24-minute song is kind of a commercial suicide. And don't get me wrong, I can name, and I'm pretty sure that you guys can do the same, and dozens of bands who could do exactly what I just said, starting a compilation with a very long song, and the new listener discovering them would be instantly hooked. But to my ears, the greatest shows on earth is nowhere near the pinnacle of Nightwish career, but rather the opposite.
I want to cut in really quick here just to say, I know you got more, just to say that I completely agree. And listening to the compilation, I don't think it's anywhere even near the top half of the tracks on the compilation. I don't think it was one of the best, and to be so long and not be one of the best, and to be the very first song on the album, I thought that was a poor choice myself. So continue.
It is a poor choice. It could have been a beautiful track, but the willingness to make it longer for sheer omnipotence actually conspired to destroy it. In its pursuit of the bigger, the better motto, the beautiful piano quickly becomes frustrating due to its 3.5-minute repetitions, and then Jansen's gracious pseudo-operatic performance is lost on a quick intro with a monologue. When the actual song finally kicks in, and we are already 5 minutes into the track, it navigates a scarce 3 minutes of splendor with some riveting spoken verses, but it loses track of itself in what have become the stereotypical of instrumental parts, several of ambient sounds, and self-plagiarizing moments with some sort of bye-bye beautiful meeting story time. And finally, 8 more minutes of instrumental soundtrackage, spring with more monologuing, which fades into even more ambient noises. This track for me certainly honors the word endless in the album title.
Oh dear. Oh dear.
It never finishes.
You're making me cry, Joel.
I love that during this we could hear Gonzo's soul crying. A little ignorance.
And I'm not done yet.
I can't take it.
When
He's
you
just
are
getting
listening
warmed
to
up.
the first tracks, obviously they come from their last record, Endless Forms Most Beautiful. I remembered about Jansen's performance on it. When I heard that she was the new vocalist, I was really excited. A really tremendous addition. She can sing operatically like Tarja, and also in a more pop style like Annette, and even has the ability to growl. However, when I listened to the last album, I couldn't help but feeling that she was criminally underused, like prevented from using her voice full potential. Just listen to her work in After Forever and Revamp, and you'll realize their first foray into the band's discography was a wasted opportunity in the vocal department.
I do agree there.
Nonetheless, she gives an incredible live performance fronting the band, and I'm sure Gonzo can attest to that since he saw them playing live only a few days ago. If you're still following after my mini rant, my other gripe with the album is that many of their other good songs didn't make it to the list. Songs like Passion and the Opera, Swan Heart, The Pharaoh Sails to Orion, Wishmaster, This Silent Complete, etc., they could have been considered.
All right, so here's what I want to do. I know Gonzo is going to have some words, but I want to give him some time to cool down, collect his thought, make sure no X was entered, and let's get. We haven't heard a lot from Rodrigo, so let's get his thoughts on Nightwish and what he thought of just the compilation and his general history. Why don't you give us a little bit, Rod?
Yeah, to me, I'm a new fan of Nightwish. They've always been on my radar of bands to check out eventually, but I never did. And to me, this compilation serves me well because it's a chance of catching up with their back catalog. But that being said, I see Joel's point in the fact that they have already 6 other compilations. So it's a tricky thing because there's both sides of it. Of course, for me, I appreciate the fact that I can now enjoy a good extract of their repertoire. But the other thing as well is they're on a celebratory tour. Okay, so it makes sense for the fans to have a look at that and see what songs they'll focus on the tour. Somehow it makes sense for me. And the other thing as well is that Thomas he said he reached a creative peak with Endless Form Was Beautiful, and he said he wanted to take some time until he focused on the next Nightwish album. So they're doing the celebratory tour, and they did the Ori album, which I reviewed for Sonic Perspectives, which is completely different from Nightwish. It's almost like the folky elements of Nightwish, but without the weight, without the heaviness. So he's trying to veer away a little bit from Nightwish, from the composition side of Nightwish, and then so to get some breathing space, and then he'll focus on it in 2020, I think. That's when the next album is scheduled to be released. But the other side as well is, I mean, you have this fabulous vocalist, like Joe said, and you release one album with her, and then the next one is going to be 2020. So in 8 years, you have only 2 studio releases with a fabulous vocalist like Floor. So it seems a bit of a waste when you look at it this way. So I don't know, Gonzo, do you want to contribute to that a little bit?
Yes, I would love to. I am on board with you. With your assertion that it was a little strange to put out a greatest hits compilation after having only put out one album with their singer. As far as I'm concerned, Nightwish have finally found their singer with Miss Flor Jansen. I would have preferred if they had re-recorded several of the older songs with Flor Jansen singing, especially with Annette. I think Annette sounds fine on Dark Passion Play, but she's not a rock singer. She's a pop singer. She sounded fantastic on songs like Amaranth, but by the time Imaginarium rolled around, she just sounded out of place. And if you see the Showtime Storytime DVD, you can hear how Flor Jansen has injected a sense of purpose into those Imaginarium songs that I'm afraid were just lacking when they were recorded in the studio. It would have been fantastic to hear Flor on some of the older Tarja songs, because she generally does not sing them with the operatic approach that Tarja used. And even though Tarja's operatic vocals were one of the things that drew everybody to Nightwish back when they were first getting notice, I think that that Miss Janssen's approach does the songs a considerable amount of justice. It's a different take, and it's a take that I welcome. Now, regarding the greatest show on earth, having been a Nightwish fan since their second album came out, I have had the honor of hearing that song performed live not once but twice. And I'm going to disagree with you guys. I think that is Nightwish at their apex. In my opinion, everything that Nightwish has done has only been leading up to that one song. And a great part of it, part of the reason that I have that opinion is because so rarely do you hear any rock song being written about science. And so rarely do you hear a rock song that glorifies science. And to hear this 20-odd minute epic that I think outdoes my previous 2 favorite Nightwish songs, and those are The Poet and the Pendulum and Ghost Love Score, I think that this song pulverizes those 2, and I still love those 2 songs. This one, and with its guest appearance by the evolutionary biologist Richard Dawkins, who reads from his own books and who reads from Charles Darwin's Origin of the Species, to me, to my nerdy, sciencey, ears, sounds breathtaking. And I'm not going to lie, when they played it the other night, I got chills. I wept. It really, really moved me. And even though I think it is an odd choice for the first track on a Greatest Hits album, I'm grateful that it's there. And as far as Flor Jansen's talent being underutilized, I held that same opinion for the first several times that I listened to Endless Forms Most Beautiful, their first and so far only album with her. But the more I absorbed it, the more I became convinced that they didn't hire her to show off. You know, Tarja did that. She showed off a lot. They didn't hire Flora Jansen for her to show off. They hired her to serve the song. And in that capacity, she's kicking ass. I'm sorry, but
All right. And I want to go into one comment kind of about the timing of the compilation, because I understand what you guys said about, they're doing this celebratory tour and to put out a compilation now. That I definitely get. But the one thing I would have, I think, preferred to see, because I've seen other bands do it. I think Journey's one example, and there's maybe a few other. I think when Endless Forms Most Beautiful came out, I think the ideal thing would have been to do like a 2-disc thing where the bonus disc, the second disc, was a compilation, kind of like here is our past, and the main disc is here is our future. And a few bands have done that. I think that's a great approach when you have that kind of major shift in the band or some sort of major change. It really, brings old fans up to speed, and this is what we've done, and here is what we're doing going forward. Joel, you had a comment?
A tiny comment on my part. Yeah, probably Gonzo is right when he says that they didn't hire Jansen to show off. But in my humble opinion, the solid reason why they didn't is because Thomas doesn't want anyone to take an outstanding role. He wants to run the show by himself. He needs a lesson on restraint. And if you listen to the mix of Endless Forms Most Beautiful, you realize the keyboards are mixed all the way to the forefront. He certainly put a leash on Floor. I have no doubts about it. And probably that's the underlying reason he kicked Tarja out, because he couldn't control her anymore.
All right, well, let me just say, if we had the chance, wouldn't we all put a leash on Floor? Anyway, moving on. Rodrigo, you had a comment?
Bazinga. No.
Oh, we're such jerks.
I have a question for Gonzo, actually, because they said that they were going to rework some of the songs for this tour, but the comment I heard was that it was just the Uilleann pipes replacing the keyboards here and there, and that Floor reworked the vocals here and there. Was there a major change that you noticed in the arrangement of the songs?
There wasn't a major change in most of the songs, but I do appreciate that they were utilizing Troy more, because on their previous tour for Endless Forms, he was on stage maybe half the time. This particular time, they actually opened with Troy on stage by himself with his pipes, and the very first melody that he played was the opening melody from the song Swanheart from Oceanborn, which he's not even on. And it blew my mind that I might actually get to hear that song live, even though I never liked that song. Just like, whoa, what a throwback. That's 20 years old. Have they ever played this live? I don't know. But they did use that. And Troy did lead vocals on the song The Carpenter, when he sounded a lot better than Tuomas did. And he was playing second guitar. On The Carpenter, he was also playing, I think, a mandolin. And Flora Jansen has changed some of the vocals. She did some operatic vocals on the old Tarja songs, which she usually doesn't do. She did a few, and she's very good at doing both. She's obviously the most well-rounded singer that Nightwish has ever had. My one complaint my two complaints about Nightwish's set, which certainly don't nullify the experience, are that, to my knowledge, Miss Jansen has never used backing tracks on her vocals the way Tarja did live. On the DVDs that I've seen of Floor with Nightwish, and on the DVD and on the performances that I've seen her with, it's always been just her live voice with no vocal tracks backing her. That's different this time. They used vocal backing tracks of her own, not of Tarja's, in about 3 songs. And another thing that kind of rubbed me the wrong way was when they played the Kinslayer, which is a song that I absolutely adore. Marco did Ike Phil's vocal parts, except he sang them rather than spoke them. And to me, it sounded a little disjointed. I love Ike Phil's voice. I'm a big fan of especially the first Babylon Horrors album. And Ike Phil's menacing Elvis-type voice is a big part of that. I I might be in the minority here, but I love his vocal contribution to the Kinslayer. And Marco's take on it just sounded a little odd.
Okay, well, one thing, you brought up the song The Carpenter, and I actually had a comment about that, so I'm glad you brought it up. When I was listening to Decades, like I say, this is the first time I was hearing a lot of the older material, and is for the album that's off of, you can probably speak to this, Gonzo, better than anyone, but as I'm going back and back and back, it seemed like that song was both in its execution and the production value was so disjointed compared to everything that came after it. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, Angels Fall First was actually going to be their first demo, and when and it was released as an album, and maybe the timing was good, but as far as I understand, Tuomas has never been fond of that decision. But it certainly brought attention to them, and it was a part of what brought Nightwish to where they are now.
Yeah, fair enough. And I think, every band has a starting point, and, Dream Theater is another great example of a first album that had questionable production that really, hampered it. They obviously did pretty well from there. But, everyone's always going to look back at that first album and say, oh, what's the sound on this like,
Recorded in a cave.
Now, Austin, we haven't heard much from you. Have you seen Nightwish at all, either with Floor or previously?
I have never gotten to see them live. That said, I have all of their DVDs and now Blu-rays, so which I've watched extensively. But no, I've never gotten the chance to see them. But they do hold a special place in my heart because I first got into them when I was in Germany, actually, in 2004. And, where I grew up, you don't really see a whole lot of Subway posters. Well, because where I grew up, there were no Subways. So that was the kind of thing you see in movies. But when I was over in Munich, I saw entire walls of Subways plastered with posters for the single of Nemo from the Once album, back when Tarja was still the lead vocalist.
And would the Subways sell those alongside the $5 footlongs?
It's... They even made a jingle for it and everything. No, it was, to me, it was really cool just walking. I was in college then, and just walking with my class. I was like, holy crap, I know that band. This is so cool. Like it just felt like I was finally seeing sort of part of that Swedish, Finnish, Scandinavian prog metal culture kind of like, firsthand. And when I was in Berlin, I bought the CD single at a big record store of Nemo and I think Planet Hell. And I've been a fan ever since, 14 years ago. And I've never gotten the chance to see them live, unfortunately. And talking about decades, or decades, as I believe it's pronounced. No, I'm just kidding. It's, if they want to do a celebratory tour, I'm totally cool with that at this point. 20 years in, granted, I do agree with what you guys have said, that the album does seem a little pointless. I know they're remastered some of the older songs, but like what you guys have said, like Gonzalo, you've said, might be nice to hear some different sides of things, some different takes on things. Like Joel was saying about, Floor's vocal performance on Endless Form's Most Beautiful. I feel like this compilation played it a bit safe as well. I feel like to justify their fans opening up their wallets, or even that they were giving away the album as part of their VIP meet and greet on this tour, thus raising the price of the VIP meet and greet, I feel like it needed to be a little bit more special than it is to justify another one coming out. That said, I think maybe this is sort of their way of underlining the fact, like Gonzalo said, that Floor is their vocalist, that they fully stand behind her, that she deserves to be on a compilation as much as her predecessors, and this is the singer going forward. And I think it's a statement that way, possibly, but I do think, especially the vinyl box set, the price tag on that, I think it needed to be a little bit more special to justify the price point at this stage in their career. And that said, I'm a huge fan of what Tuomas has been doing lately. Ari, and even, and the funny thing is, I'm a huge fan of the books where the namesake of Ari comes from. So I'm even more excited for it in that regard. But even The Life and Times of Scrooge, his album he produced based on the classic Don Rosa graphic novels or comics about Scrooge McDuck. Even that's a great little fun album. And I guess I'm still curious to see, based on those couple of albums, where they go next with Floor. I think she has a great amount of potential, but I do feel like they played it possibly a little too safe on the last album. And it's an interesting, still transitional period, I think, for Nightwish right now.
Yeah, one thing I think we all agree on is that we all pretty much love Floor, and we're all kind of in suspense waiting to see, how they really go forward onto the next album with her. Now, Gonzo, you had something to add for us?
Yeah, before I get to that, I do want to bring up Troy one more time. I really, really appreciate his contributions to Nightwish. His background is obviously in Celtic music, and I actually first heard him with a Christian Celtic rock band called Iona, and he was their piper, like in the early 90s. And then to see him reemerge in this heavy metal band, and partaking in a media campaign called Openly Secular was really interesting. It was great. But like the more personal one that I mentioned, the song Nemo came up in the conversation earlier. And at the time that song came out, I was quote unquote living in El Paso, where my son had just been born. And this was back when his mother and I liked each other. He was 2 years old, and his mother and I were very, very big Nightwish fans going back to, their second album. And when that song came out, I mean, it was in constant rotation in the house. And I had downloaded the video from some IRC channel, and we would periodically watch it. And a 2-year-old boy, barely able to talk, would walk up to us and say, "Watch Nightwish," and we absolutely had to comply. For his 6th birthday, I took him to see Nightwish in Austin. For his 9th birthday, I literally introduced him to the band. And they are some of the coolest photos that I've ever taken with my phone. They're of Floor Jansen and Troy and Tuomas hanging out with this 9-year-old boy backstage. And it's just cool. And that's my little personal story about Nightwish.
Well, let me say that is cool. And the one reason that is really cool is because so many parents have similar stories in that it's like Frozen that they're being forced to watch again and again and again. And you're getting to watch freaking Nightwish DVDs. So you freaking lucked out pretty well there, I would say.
Yeah. In fact, the first time that we saw Nightwish together, my son and I, their manager, Evo, likes to hang out in the crowd. In fact, he was the guy that was passing out the CDs on this tour. But he was hanging out in the crowd, and I had met him on the previous tour. So I said, "Hey, man, we met last time, blah, blah, blah. I brought my son with me." "Oh, that's so cool. Would your son like a T-shirt?" And he gave my son a T-shirt.
Oh, that is cool.
And then the second time when he was turning 9, the security actually let him sit in the photo pit for the entire set. He got a towel from Tuomas. He got a pic from Empu. He got a set list from Troy. My kid made out.
That is really cool to see a band connecting with people like that. And I'll say, what I'm thankful for with this compilation and doing this, because as I had mentioned, I had written off Nightwish and that I just didn't pay them much attention back in the early years, even though I probably should have. And then when Annette came in, I gave them another chance and love Dark Passion Play. I really do. And then I was crushed when Imaginarium came out because honestly, aside from 2 or 3 tracks, I think Imaginarium is an absolute bore fest. Quite frankly. And so I had this momentum like, okay, and that's in the band. I'm going to really like this band now. And then that kind of got sucked back out of me to the point where I even when Floor came back in, I didn't pay attention. I didn't follow them. I didn't even check out Endless Forms Most Beautiful. I will admit that. And now with this compilation, I'm back to the point where, okay, I need to get that album first off. And if I love Floor, and I need to, if the chance comes up again, I know I just missed them, unfortunately, doing this tour. But it's like on the next tour, I'm on board. If they hit Philly, I'll be there. So I am thankful, to be going forward with them a little bit and giving them another shot. Austin, you had a comment?
I was just going to say, it's a good time, honestly, just on the tail of what you're talking about. It's a good time to get back into them. I really feel that way. I know we bashed a little bit Endless Forms Most Beautiful, but I think it's a very good album. I think if pretty much any other band released that album, it would blow our minds. But the bar is set so high for Nightwish that we're like, it's okay, So I think, Nick, you're in a great position to be, getting back into Nightwish at this point. But the one thing I wanted to ask Gonzo, since you just saw them, I don't know what's happening with Yuka, the drummer, because a few years ago he was having like really bad insomnia and kind of was on a hiatus from the band. Is he on this tour? Is he actually back with them?
No, it's still Kai from Swallow the Sun. He's doing this tour, and he's doing a fantastic job.
Oh, yeah.
But seeing Yuka on stage, Yuka makes the most ridiculous faces. He brings a sort of energy to his live performance that you see in very, very few drummers. And I miss it. It. And I haven't gotten an update about him. I haven't seen anything, but as far as I know, he's still in recovery. It's been a few years.
Yeah. God. I feel bad. Life on the road with a band is not easy to begin with for anybody, but, just full-blown insomnia. Think how many years, and especially with just the physicality of drumming like a 2-hour set like that. I feel bad for the poor guy. So I hope he's doing okay.
All right, Joel, you had something to add?
Yeah, I wanted to add a detail. I recently read an interview with Floor, and she was asked about Yuka. Surprisingly, they found out that his insomnia issues were related to touring. He's now doing perfectly fine and actually managing the European division of EMP, which distributes Nightwish merchandise in Europe. And he keeps in touch with the band, and they remain very good friends.
Okay, now he was listed as the official drummer on Endless Forms Most Beautiful, which I'm going to see with you guys. That's my favorite album by them. He's listed as a band member, but it also lists Kai as the performer and as the touring drummer. Do you know if he's going to get back to recording with them at least? And maybe doing special shows here and there? Did they talk about that?
It sounds like he could.
She didn't go into any further details. I believe that she also mentioned, and I might be mistaken, I'm trying to remember, but I believe that also the interviewer asked her if he still played, and she said that yes, that he still plays drums. So he could be able, I guess.
Yeah, and it sounds like you had said that his problem was related to touring, so it's always possible they get back to a situation with like Jimmy Keegan and Spock's Beard for many years, to where Nick would record all the drums, but Jimmy was always the drummer that you saw. Unfortunately, if you have a health problem that's only triggered when you're touring, what are you gonna do? There's only, your options are limited at that point. So I'm going to go with Austin's suggestion here. We already know that my favorite Nightwish album is Dark Passion Play, but since this was a compilation, it wasn't looking back at their history. Real quick, I know Gonzo, you already told us Endless Forms Most Beautiful for you was your favorite, but Rodrigo, what was your favorite Nightwish album?
Dark Passion Play, I would say.
All right, that's 2 votes for Dark Passion Play. Joel?
That's going to be a tough one. Probably I will go with one from Tarja's era. And don't get me wrong, I do agree with Gonzalo when he says that probably Flor is the definitive singer for Nightwish. She can do everything. She can do what Tarja couldn't, and obviously what Annette couldn't at the same time. But, probably for some sort of like nostalgia, I would say that I would go with Once.
All right, let's head over to the last guy here. Austin, your favorite?
All right, so believe it or not, Joel just named my number 2 favorite album, the one that got me into the band, Once. But here's one more vote for the vocalist who's kind of the dark horse of the band, Dark Passion Play is my all-time favorite Nightwish album.
Wow, how about that? Like I say, I think we would all agree that Annette is probably not our favorite vocalist the band has ever had, but look at the support to that album, that's pretty neat.
Definitely, I agree. It's just epic. It's larger than life to me, and that will win with me every time.
Okay. So
I do think that Annette was definitely the right singer for that album.
Mm-hmm.
I would agree with that as well. I think that that album wouldn't sound as well with either Tarja or Floor. So I think that was just the right place at the right time for them.
She took some chances on it, that's for sure.
Great discussion, guys. Thank you all again for joining me. I want to thank Chris, who was here earlier and is not here now as well. Thank you all, and don't forget to like us on Facebook, on Twitter, on YouTube, and of course subscribe to the podcast so you get Talking Perspectives as well as interviews and reviews, the audio from that straight to your phone and into your ears. Thank you, everyone, and have a fantastic night.